Folks, it's Monday morning as I film this, and we are, possibly on the third day separated from this jailbreak that took place in the early morning hours of Friday last week. There are still 7 prisoners at large. Only 3 have been apprehended. Folks, this story is so big, there's actually a Wikipedia page that's been created called the 2025 New Orleans Jailbreak. There's 2 stories that I want to share with you today, one of which illustrates the timeline of events that took place leading up to and everything that transpired during this jailbreak. And then the other, I guess we should probably start with that. With the extended period of time that it's been that these guys have been at large for, authorities are upping the ante in relation to reward money being offered. Reward increases as search for escaped New Orleans inmates intensifies. And it says that federal and state officials have increased the reward for information leading to the arrest of the 7 inmates who broke out of the New Orleans jail by climbing through a hole behind the toilet. The massive manhunt for 7 of the 10 escapees entered a third day in Louisiana on May 18th. It's the 19th as I'm filming this. During a news conference, FBI Special Agent Jonathan Trapp said he believes members of the public were helping the 7 inmates elude authorities. Now, they've said in other news conferences, anybody who is believed to help these guys is going to face the full brunt of the law. Trapp said the FBI is now offering $10,000 per inmate, while the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms is offering $5,000 per inmate. And then Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry also noted that the Crime Stopper reward will be increased to $5,000 per inmate, which will be covered by the governor and state senator Cameron Henry. Any information leading to the apprehension of these guys is subject to a $20,000 reward, it's sounding like. Yeah, they want to get these guys up off of the streets as quickly as possible because, again, this is definitely making the justice system down in Louisiana, especially the New Orleans area, look quite foolish. We hear about people who escape from jails and prisons. Not all the time, but sometimes. Why does this particular case hit so different? Is it because there were 10 prisoners who broke out? Is it because of how much surveillance footage captured this actual escape? Or potentially the lack of staff that was at the helm when all of this transpired? Where the hell was everybody at? I understand that the civilian technician took a lunch break, stepped away, as the story reports, to get food. But was she the only person who was working in the facility? Where the hell was everybody at? Tons of surveillance footage capturing these guys. Somebody actually sent me a video link, and shout out to everybody who's been taking the time to check out these videos. Ironically, or maybe not at all, certainly getting a lot of people from the South Louisiana, the New Orleans area, who are checking out these videos and really enjoying these. So a very special shout out to each and every one of you. But one of those awesome people actually sent me a video link that shows the French Quarter and that facial recognition software camera, potentially, if not that, at least camera footage of one of the escapees walking through the French Quarter, maybe 2. There's 2 individuals who are pictured in this surveillance footage. But to me, looking at this surveillance footage, these guys could not look any more suspicious if they tried. Hey, look, rule number 1, at least, the unspoken rule, or maybe one that should go without even having to be mentioned. If you're going to break out of jail and do so in such an exuberant way, you might want to try to look as normal out in the free world as you possibly can. These guys look nothing short of suspicious. Trying to hide their faces from the cameras, absolute insanity, if you ask me. Here's how the nighttime escape of 10 Louisiana inmates from a New Orleans jail unfolded. Folks, let's go ahead and take a look at the timeline of events that took place on May the 16th. Just after midnight Friday, a corrections monitoring technician in New Orleans stepped away for food. When he left, wait a minute, all the other stories that I've read mentioned a she. Oh boy, here we go with all sorts of mixed up information. So not sure how accurate all of this is going to be. But here's the hoping. When he left, the Orleans Justice Center had been locked down since 10:30 p.m. So we're talking about an hour and a half after lockdown, this technician stepped away to go grab some food. Locked down since 10:30 p.m. as it usually was, with inmates expected to be in their cells for the night. But in the technician's absence, several inmates began tampering with the door of cell Delta 1006. They tugged and pulled until it broke open and snuck into the handicapped cell. Then a man squeezed through a small hole in the wall behind a metal toilet. Another followed, and another. 7 more would make their way through the tiny opening as 10 inmates fled from the New Orleans jail and into the warm, muggy night. They left a message on the wall on the way out. Too easy, LOL. Pretty certain that should be TOO, but not trying to be the grammar police here. You know, I want to talk about this cell real quick that these guys broke out from. This seems to be an empty cell, an open cell, not necessarily because it was locked, but an open cell in terms of the fact that nobody was housed in there. A handicap cell. This was an ADA compliant cell, meaning that an individual in a wheelchair could have been housed here given the way that the sink and the toilet were fashioned in this cell. Why did they pick this cell to escape from? Did somebody know something in terms of maybe behind this particular sink and toilet would be a bigger opening? But speaking of the opening, you know, when you look at this hole that these guys escaped from, I hate to say this, and I'm a larger fella myself, but I don't think a heavier set fella would have been able to fit through that opening. The men, the youngest 19 years old, I thought the youngest guy was 20, and the oldest 42, crazy to think I'm 42. I try to picture myself in this scenario right now. What would I do if I had done something like this? I gotta wonder, are any of these guys considering turning themselves back in? Like, yo, this was just way too crazy what we did. They're going to catch us. The paranoia has got to be at an all-time high. And maybe they're thinking, if I just turn myself in, maybe it will be better for me. I'm highly certain none of these guys are thinking this. And in fact, it's probably more like that Leonardo DiCaprio movie, Catch Me If You Can. The men, the youngest is 19 years old and the oldest 42, face a wide array of charges, including murder, aggravated assault with a firearm, and domestic battery. We've talked about that in previous videos. They had prepared for their escape and possibly had help, officials said. Toiletries left behind had been used to remove the toilet and sink, as well as bolts in the cell. At least one steel bar protecting plumbing fixtures appeared to have been intentionally cut using a tool. This is very interesting to learn about. These guys were fashioning tools, it sounds like, out of items that they had readily available, their toiletries. Maybe taking their spork and fashioning that into some sort of a screwdriver. I did a video years ago talking about how to make a weapon in prison. But in that video, I showed how guys could cut through plexiglass. And plexiglass is one of many different things that guys can use to make a weapon. And I talked about how they can twist up thin strips of a sheet to make a twine or a rope. And then if you just rub that back and forth, almost like two sticks in the forest trying to make a little campfire, the friction, the heat will actually begin to cut through whatever it is that you're cutting through. I don't necessarily know if you could use that to cut through a steel bar, but I'm wondering if they had something else that they were able to use in lieu of that. Maybe a piece of a guitar string or something that was able to be used essentially as a hacksaw. Around 1 a.m., nearly 40 minutes after their escape began, they left the jail through a loading door where supplies were brought in. It took them 40 minutes from the time that they entered that handicapped cell to exit from the jail. And I'm sure that that's evident and been learned by looking at the surveillance cameras. We've got footage of the guy tampering with the cell, and then we have footage of them exiting the jail. I'm sure that there's a 40-minute lapse there. 40 minutes after their escape began, they left the jail through a loading door where supplies were brought in, sprinting and leaping off the dock to freedom in a blur of gray, beige, and orange. One wore a blue hat. Two others had orange shoes. One man tripped over a bundle of fabric he was carrying before getting up and running out of the camera's range. I just imagine what the sheriff was thinking the first time that they saw this footage, like, oh my God, we are about to be the laughing stock of the nation for this one. Boy, did we drop the ball here. The group scaled a fence along Interstate 10 using blankets they brought to shield themselves from the barbed wire, law enforcement said later. The inmates dashed across train tracks and multiple lanes of traffic on their way to a nearby neighborhood where they shed their jail jumpsuits. Imagine living in that neighborhood right across the street from this jail, across 8 lanes of traffic. The only thing that separates you from this facility. And I wonder how extensive the manhunt is in this particular neighborhood. During a routine head count at 8:30 a.m., officials finally discovered that multiple inmates had escaped. The missing inmates, at first reported to be 11 men before it was later corrected to 10, triggered a widespread manhunt across Louisiana and 7 nearby states: Texas, Mississippi, Arkansas, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. Why only 7 nearby states, and why not nationwide? Again, I've talked about this in all 3 videos that I filmed about this story thus far. If you guys have missed any of my coverage on this, I'm going to link those videos down below. But we're talking about a means to an end right here, and the lack thereof that these guys probably have. Or don't have. They probably don't really have the means to hop on a jet and get to California. You know, for them to be able to get past these 7 outlying states, the closest states to Louisiana, that's as far as we're expected these guys to get. That's the analytics. We've crunched the numbers. That's what it says. Okay, if these guys make it beyond this threshold, are they in the clear? Have they entered into the habitable zone? Sorry, I didn't mean to talk about it in planetary terms. If they make it beyond the likes of Texas or Mississippi or Arkansas or Georgia, are they in the clear? One or maybe some of these guys quite possibly already has, given the fact that we are now beyond the 48-hour mark. With every hour and every day that passes, these guys' chance to remain on the run probably grows to some degree. That's just my guess. I could be completely wrong about that. Their escape also unleashed several suspensions, questions about lack of transparency, and a flurry of accusations about who's to blame. As authorities at the jail activated emergency protocols, the city of New Orleans spent the morning of May 16th, that was Friday, unaware that 10 armed and dangerous men had escaped. Friday morning, everybody who was hanging out down in New Orleans in the French Quarter had no idea that amongst them could potentially be some of the most dangerous individuals who had just escaped from a jail. The public wasn't notified until nearly 11 a.m., almost 10 hours after the inmates had fled, and 3 hours after the sheriff learned they were missing. A citywide alert wouldn't be sent until 2:30 p.m. What in the world are we thinking here? Now, look, devil's advocate. Okay, if we don't alert the public and we don't raise the alarm, maybe the prisoners won't realize that we're on to them, or they'll be left to question, how much do we actually know? Forget all of that. That makes 0 sense whatsoever. There is no rationale that makes sense, in my opinion, as to why you would not immediately alert the public. Maybe they were thinking the facial recognition software and cameras was going to be enough to capture these guys. Even with all of that, I am blown away to know that these guys have still gotten away. Here's another wild statement. Down the road from the Orleans Justice Center, the staff at the district attorney's office was unaware of the situation unfolding at the jail. That might not even sound all that damning at first, until you hear that Orleans Parish District Attorney Jason Williams said he walked into the office Friday morning not knowing people his office had convicted were on the run. Williams himself had prosecuted Derek Groves, one of the escapees who had been convicted of murdering 2 men. What if these guys escaped with a mission, with a plan to get some get back? All of these individuals' lives are in danger. Witnesses, prosecutors, judges, law enforcement. And nobody was made aware of this until 10 hours after the escape took place. I understand that for 8 of those hours, nobody at all knew anything about this. But it's still crazy to hear that, once you're still waiting for whatever reason, whatever rationale to alert the public. Williams said his office was notified around 11 a.m. and immediately began calling witnesses. Some of the escaped men, he said, were known to have threatened witnesses in order to evade prosecution. This is crazy. Around 11:13 a.m., he called Deputy U.S. Marshal Brian Fair and Captain Rodney Hyatt with Troop NOLA for help. He said neither had received contact from the sheriff's office. He said it was a very dangerous situation, made more dangerous because of the poor leadership and lack of transparency. Not only, obviously, do you have all of these problems at this particular facility, broken locks, no staff, and lack thereof of it, but it certainly sounds like in the sheriff's department, there is a total fiasco at the helm taking place right now. The first inmate captured, Kendall Miles, was arrested at 11:22 a.m. shortly after the public and district attorney had been notified. Miles had been hiding under a car at a hotel parking garage, law enforcement said. 4 supervisors and 36 staff members were working at the time of the escape, the sheriff's office said. 3 jail employees have been suspended without pay, pending the outcome of an internal investigation as of Friday evening. These guys or gals have been suspended without pay. Clearly, that statement alone lets you know that something was up, or they're going to wear this, whether they had something to do with it or not. Heads are definitely going to roll in this situation. Williams called the escape a complete failure of the most basic responsibilities entrusted to a sheriff or jail administrator. Orleans Parish Sheriff Office Major Salas Phillips Jr. said the department was underfunded, understaffed, underpaid. Oh my God. We ain't even making enough money to be dealing with all of this. Imagine how many people are just going to quit behind this from the sheriff's office. And they're already understaffed and underpaid. Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry said this is what happens when George Soros funds New Orleans elections. I don't know nothing about that. Certainly going the political route right there. And I'm sure that everybody who watches this from down south in Louisiana probably has a comment one way or another about that particular statement. Folks, again, here is an image of these 10 that have escaped, 3 of which who have been apprehended, and there is a $20,000 reward being offered for any information that leads to the apprehension of these guys. But again, with every day that passes, it certainly seems like these guys are standing an even better chance of remaining out there on the run. I don't particularly think that these guys make it for the long haul. Maybe within a week, by the end of this week, I would even project or guesstimate that they've at least apprehended a few more of these guys. I don't think that they got all of them by the end of the week, but I think that they've got a few more of them. Do you think that anybody actually gets away and stays away? Let me leave you guys with that question. And as I wrap this up, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to check this out. It really means the world that you guys are allowing me to share my piece on this. And this is coverage that I love to bring you guys, and I've got so much more as well too. Thank you for taking the time. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like and a comment. I'll look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. And until next time, enjoy life, the free world. Never take a moment for granted and make the most of every day. Peace.